Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 43 of the Survival Project. Today's guest is Sharan Singh. Sharan was diagnosed with lupus as a teenager. That was only the beginning. Sharan went through years of failed medications, chemotherapy, high dose steroids, multiple autoimmune conditions, and rare complications that eventually led to both hips being replaced in her early 20s. This isn't a story about everything that went wrong. It's about refusing to be defined by illness, about becoming your own advocate, finding purpose through the pain, and choosing hope when life keeps presenting impossible challenges. Today, Sharan shares the reality of living with chronic illness, the mental toll of navigating invisible disease, why she now chose a career in healthcare because of her own experiences. Sharon also has a massive platform on TikTok and using her experience to help thousands of others feel less alone. So let's get into it. Sharon, welcome to the Survival Project. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I came across your journey on TikTok and my God, you've really been through it and come out the other side. Like, it's a very inspirational journey and I can't wait for everyone to hear it. I suppose diving back to your diagnosis in 2015, when was the first time you realized, oh my God, this is a real serious problem I'm going to have to deal with?
I would say it was after I started the medication for lupus. I mean, even like being in that room of like the rheumatologist, I think my first appointment lasted like 8 hours. Like throughout the clinic day, 8 to 5, I was there getting all these tests done, coming back and forth into the clinic. And I think that's kind of when I realized, okay, this might be serious. But then when I started taking the medications and I started to feel terrible and I wasn't making any progress, I was like, this is getting worse. And it really hit me then.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of these medications are there to help us, but they can unfortunately have some very, very negative side effects. What did you
Yeah.
experience on the negative side of things from the medication?
Quite a lot. I mean, I would say like some of my first side effects were like insomnia, muscle aches, my skin was thinning from the steroids that I was on. I gained a lot of weight. I gained 60 pounds from steroids, bone deterioration, had to have like 4 surgeries because of the medication. So my journey has just been like a lot of like from mild side effects to like the most severe and rare side effects a person could have.
As if lupus and the problem you're experiencing isn't bad enough, more things cascade down on top of you. Like, steroids are a negative evil. There's a saying, a woman recently commented on one of my posts, better pred than dead, about prednisone. It's
Uh-huh.
one I experienced myself. Moon face, ballooned up. There's a photo of me where I literally look like I've swallowed two of me from a couple of years ago. It's
Me
it's it's
too.
crazy the effects that it can have on us. When you were on such high levels of medication, did your symptoms improve on the side of the autoimmune condition?
No, it didn't. It got worse.
Oh my
So
God.
that's where I kind of became like a very complex patient, was because everything that they were throwing at me just wasn't responding well, or I didn't tolerate it. Um, and it was like a journey of like years of trying to find the right medication, and I could not find anything. And the disease kept progressing. And I started getting more autoimmune diseases because when the inflammation's out of control, it can trigger other things. So they were just kind of throwing whatever they could at me, trial and error. I came to a point at some time where they were like, we may consider clinical trials for you, because they had gone through so many medications. And it was, yeah, it came to that point.
I hear you. It's a horrible journey. My gastroenterologist used to always say they used to bring me up at the conferences as a complex patient that they could
Yeah.
discuss. We're celebrities.
Yeah. Rare patients. We're talking in teams. I mean, I was seen at UCLA Health, so I'm very grateful that they have a great team there. So they had people from all over who do their residency and fellowships there. So had a lot of great minds working together to figure out what was wrong with me.
Really and truly, the need for all these minds to come together is so harrowing on the self, to think like, oh, this is so bad, but I'm also a complex version of how bad it is. It's so tough, so tough. But
It is tough.
could you bring it into what was like a day to day like for you when you were experiencing the height of symptoms?
I was in high school, so I was around 15, 16 years of age. So I would wake up, feel awful, take my medications, go to school. I was also on chemotherapy at one point, so I would like have to like wear hats. I really became isolated because nobody really knew what I was going through. And like being on chemotherapy for something that's not cancer, it's very complex. So for me, I was just trying to live as normally as possible. I was going to the doctors at least once a week. So I was commuting to UCLA from my hometown, which is about 2 hours away from UCLA, back and forth at least once a week for years. And so that it was like a really insane journey for me, especially as a teenager. I mean, I didn't really have much control over like, a lot of things that I do now as an adult.
Yeah, like being a teenager in high school and like you're learning so many things, you want to fit in. It's a tough time without any issues on top of it, but throw an autoimmune disease on top of it like that is just a hard road. My God. And I imagine
Yeah.
that the 2 hour journeys for treatment, that must have been very taxing on your body, fatigue wise and everything like that. How did you cope through that?
I would say, honestly, sometimes I didn't. I mean, it was very defeating mentally. I did my best of my ability to, go through each day and I researched a lot. There was a lupus books that I would read about the research. I was so young. I was 16 and doing all this. I wrote like a 10-page research paper my sophomore year of high school. And it was about the treatments and the advances of it. And that's where I kind of came across stem cell therapy. And I was seeing that they were doing like these trials at Northwestern, and it gave me hope because I was like, oh my gosh, like this puts people into full remission. Like, it's basically where they wipe out your entire immune system with chemotherapy and basically give you like a bone marrow transplant. But they were doing it for lupus patients. But I think the trial got shut down, but it gave me so much hope because I was like, they're doing all these things. There might be a light at the end of this tunnel. Like, I may not have to live like this forever. So I really dove into research and I was like, this is so interesting to me about like how many different things that they're using and trying. And so that's where I kind of found hope and peace.
Oh my God, we do have to do our own research and become your number one advocate. Because even in so many situations, you have to keep on top of everything because God forbid that the people that are treating you might not hear certain information. So it's really testament to what you had to do to fight for yourself. As the lupus progressed, you ended up needing surgical intervention. Could you dive into that for us?
Yeah. So back in 2018, I had just started college and I felt an ache in my hip. And we didn't really know what it was. I kind of ignored it until I couldn't ignore it anymore. And had to go to the ER from so much pain. And they found that I had a vascular necrosis in both of my hips. And for those people who don't know what that is, it's basically like bone deterioration that is a side effect from taking prednisone. It's very rare. So I was very shocked that that happened. I couldn't walk. I ended up in a wheelchair and I was begging the surgeons at UCLA to just operate on me. I was like, I'm in so much pain. They were giving me so many opiates, so many pain relievers, and nothing was working. But they wouldn't operate on me because it wasn't progressed enough to the point where they could operate on it. And because they just didn't want to operate on someone that young to give me a hip replacement. So that's where I turned to more regenerative medicine to help soothe my symptoms. And within like 2 days of receiving stem cell injections, I was able to walk again. So then, I mean, my symptoms were subsided for like, I would say a good like 3 years. And then in 2022, the hip pain started again and the bone deteriorated. So I had to get hip replacement. I had two hip replacements, both my left and right. And that was a lot to deal with. I mean, it's not easy. It was 22 when that happened, 23, 22, 2023. And yeah, I never experienced anything like that before. It took a lot of surgeons to even advocate for myself to get the surgery. I had researched different types of people who are doing so many different experimental things, and I found one in Los Angeles who actually used a special type of metal in the hip that lasts 50 years. So I wouldn't have to get it replaced again within 10 years, how typical the normal hip replacements are. And so that was the first time that I had to get surgery. And then back in 2024, my knees deteriorated and I had vascular necrosis in my knees. It just kept going. So then instead of jumping straight to a knee replacement, because the pain wasn't there yet, it was just like a very slight ache, but it was a very familiar ache at the back of my mind. I was like, I need to get this checked out. There was little lesions of a vascular necrosis in my knees and they're in some special spots too. But yet again, I went through regenerative medicine treatment to just prolong getting my knees replaced because that is a whole different beast to get your knees replaced. And so that worked. But yeah, they'd do a special type of treatment where they drilled into my knees and essentially put stem cells in there, which really helped with the pain. But some of the lesions actually got smaller and some of them got bigger. So it's kind of like 50-50 of like how my knees responded. But yeah, I'm stable now, but that was a experimental procedure that we did wasn't covered by insurance. But, now I'm feeling much better, but it was a lot to go through.
My God, you deserve to feel a lot better. You have been through hell and back. There's
It's a
just even
lot.
a lot. A lot doesn't even put the proper measurement on it. I can't, there's no words. They don't exist in the English language. I recently interviewed a guy called Jack Brennan who had Perthes disease and he had both his hips replaced. And I've heard his journey. So I won't say I have an understanding, but I've heard what he went through. So you went through hell. He's really hard to walk, I assume.
Yeah, I did so many years of physical therapy. I think I did probably like 2 or 3 years of physical therapy. And then transitioning from physical therapy, I could not work out again. I mean, I tried to go to the gym, but when I went to the gym, I found a vascular necrosis in my knees. And from lifting the weights, I mean, it puts a lot of pressure on your weight, on your joints. So when you do that, it's going to reveal a lot of injuries that you have. So then after that, I was like, I can't weight lift anymore. So I started doing Pilates, which really, really helps with my symptoms. And it's the best way for me to keep being active with keeping the strain on the joints low. And so, yeah, it's been quite a journey throughout
Yeah,
it all.
my God, it's some journey and just extras put on top. And they say, like, obviously for bone strength, they say that weight bearing exercises are great for building up your bone strength, but obviously it was having the opposite effect on you. You must have been thinking at some stage, nothing I can do is working to improve. Now, I've seen your social media, you're in great shape. The Pilates obviously does the work and you share your journey
Yeah.
with it. It's very, very inspiring to see that every obstacle that came in front of you, you found a way around it. And my God, there were some obstacles. Like to think that at 22, 23 years of age, you had to get your hips replaced, relearn how to walk, and then get back into
Yeah.
exercise. Like I can only commend you. I'm inspired hearing just your
Thank
journey.
you.
You're an amazing woman. I know you mentioned earlier that about in a situation that you didn't really get through it. I imagine you like the mental load that you must have gone through over those years, and even still, I'm sure there's still a mental load that comes with it. How have you coped moving forward in your life with everything that you went through?
I think I coped through purpose. So I learned to turn my pain into power. And I started working towards a career in healthcare. And so it's pivoted a lot because of my health. I mean, these programs, these medical programs in the US are very rigorous no matter where you go, no matter what avenue you take. And so I started working towards that. I started working in healthcare, I would say about 4 years ago. I've worked in probably 3 different specialties, and it's really given me so much perspective and it really helps me feel like I'm putting my pain into a better purpose, right? And so for me, I mean, I have a great support system too. I mean, like my friends are really there for me and help me a lot. My family try to support as much as they can, even though they don't still completely understand the disease. I also like started advocating through organizations. I'm a patient advocate on the Lupus LA, in the Lupus LA organization. So that was really like a safe space for me to really learn more about my disease, connect more with people who are also living with lupus, and the internet. Honestly, 4 years ago, I think I just posted a TikTok. It was a trend that was like moments that altered my brain chemistry. And so I made one about my autoimmune disease, didn't think anything of it. And I went from like 0 followers to like 2,000 and then 2,000 to like 10,000. And then it just kept growing. And now it's at 20K. So I'm like, that's a lot
Let's
of
go.
people who are
Yeah,
following me just for an autoimmune journey. I mean, right? So I was like, okay, that's crazy because back when I was diagnosed in 2015, I didn't know a single person with lupus. People didn't even know what autoimmune diseases were. And so for me, it's like I kind of turned to like all these outside, sources and having different people who made me feel seen and heard and really felt like belonging of a community.
yeah. Like the very everyday lived experience, I imagine, was a lot of isolation and being
Oh,
able
yeah.
to, yeah, I imagine them
'Cause
being
no
able
one
to,
gets it, and
no,
especially it's like you live such a different lifestyle in comparison to so many people. Like, you don't have the same energy levels, and especially, like, navigating that throughout your early 20s and, like, late teens, it's like everybody at that stage just wants to go out and party and have fun, and I'm like, "I'm trying to survive." So, it's a very completely different reality in comparison to a normal 20-year-old.
completely. Like in your 20s, it's about partying, drinking, making loads of mistakes, but you couldn't afford to make any mistakes.
Yeah.
In every single daily action had to be striving towards health. What has been the most positive that has come from, I suppose, finding a community online? Does it help you kind of, how would I say, feel seen yourself, but also allow people to feel seen by sharing your journey?
Say There is so much that has came from it. I mean, not only opportunities, but even connecting with people. I think connection is like the number one thing out of it is just having so many DMs come in and people like telling me like you've inspired me or you've done this or like, you make me feel seen was just like so heartwarming. And I've also met friends from social media. One of my best friends, she had DM'd me and she was like, "I'm in your area. Like, I see like the location you tagged. I'm like right near you. Would you like to meet up for lunch?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And so I met one of my best friends from the internet, which is actually crazy to me because I never expected that. I mean, I get a lot of DMs, I get a lot of messages, and so some of them are just like, can be a lot. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I don't have the energy to respond or like the bandwidth. And there are other people who, are asking for advice or just, sweet comments. So that has been like the biggest thing is like probably the connection with a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%. The DMs can get a lot, and there's so much positivity from them, and you want to get back to everyone, but you have your own life to live as well. And as you said, bandwidth, there's only so much space in the mind to
There's
deal with everything
always
you're dealing with.
yeah, you have to protect your energy as much as you can, and, sometimes it seems a bit selfish, but I think autoimmune kind of forces you to be selfish in a way because you don't have as many, spoons to give. If you ever heard of the spoon theory,
Yeah.
autoimmune patients have, like, a limited amount of energy per day, so you really have to pick and choose how you wanna spend your energy each day.
Say the more selfish you are in a certain situation means you can give more to another situation and carry some energy forward to the next day, because I suppose if we're trying too hard to I won't say please everyone, but be as open to everyone as we possibly can, it can detract from what you can possibly achieve in the future. So yeah, definitely the spoons theory is very, very real, and everyone needs to take into their day-to-day account. Has there any been, I suppose social media there's positives, but there's also negatives. Have there been any kind of negative sides to sharing your story?
I would say so. I mean, because I didn't respond back to a lot of like conventional treatments and medications didn't
Oh,
work, my turn to lifestyle alterations and regenerative medicine. And there's a lot of controversy around that because even though these interventions worked for me, they're very expensive and not everyone has access to them. And I recognize my privilege and I'm very, very grateful to have that financial support from family to allow me to get these treatments. But a lot of people will say like it's not realistic for an average person to get the treatments that you're getting or, make the lifestyle changes. I mean, not everyone can afford a Pilates membership and eating organic whole foods and, living by the beach where it's like, fresh air and a lot less, stress. And so for that, it's like, people do come at me for that, but I do try to state like, I do recognize that I have the privilege and I'm so grateful, but it's also like I still do have my symptoms and I wish I could just take a pill and be okay and be stable. I really wish I didn't have to do all these things, but like these things really did make a difference, you know? And it's like living like a low toxin lifestyle. I mean, there's a lot of controversy around that, right? Some people will claim that it makes no difference. Other people say they're in remission because of it. For me, I'm kind of like in the middle. I would say that it makes somewhat of a difference, but like, if I switch back for like a day or two, it's not going to make a huge difference. But like, I noticed that with consistency of like trying to eat things that are preservative free, whole foods, not using a lot of fragrances or dyes or things like that does make a difference in my opinion. So a lot of people do have mixed feelings about that.
yeah, it's a total lifestyle protocol that you have to take into account when you do have autoimmune. I'm on a very similar journey myself, as in none of the medication ever worked. So I've had
Yeah.
multiple surgeries to have intestines removed. And last year I just kind of tore my whole life apart and put it back together and said, okay, what can I do? And that is
Yeah.
like you said, removing potential toxins and stuff like that. Obviously some people don't agree with it, but you have to do what works for you. And by sharing the journey, you're giving people options. Once you share what is working for you, they can either decide, right, that's not for me, or I see what she's doing. If I can do that at all, let's try and implement something. And I know you say you're quite privileged there, but a lot of people can be privileged and not use it. You are using all the
That's
tools
so
at your
true.
disposal. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Unashamedly so. Do you know, that's the way to do it. Just be, you have to be yourself, be your authentic self, and do what you have to do to be the best version of yourself, which is exactly what you're doing. But I imagine it is a full-time job making sure that you're eating the right things, being consistent with it. How do you do a lot of planning and stuff like that, or are you just so in the mode of it now? It's just your daily life.
I think I've just gotten used to the routine. I think I know what to prioritize, and it's like I know how to set myself up for success is what I say every single day is like set yourself up for success. Like pre-make your meals, have things ready, have things prepared, like do things the night before that'll make your morning easier. So for me, it's like, especially like working in healthcare, it's very go, go, go. It's very quick. It's fast paced. You don't have any time for anything. But I make sure that I prioritize myself. I'm like, I need to make sure I get enough sleep so I could show up the best way that I can for the people that I support and, the people that I see. And so I really do everything in my power to make sure that like all my stuff is packed. Like I feel I'm accommodating myself. If I feel cold, I'm going to make sure that I have things to make me warm and like accommodating yourself is the biggest thing and knowing your boundaries. So that's made the biggest difference for me.
Yeah, 100%. Knowing your boundaries and accommodating yourself is what you need to do when you have an autoimmune condition, because you are the most important person to you. And even in relationships and social settings, if you're not feeling your best or doing the best things for you, you can't show up the same way for other people. So yeah, having that radical sense of self is an amazing thing that you 100% step into. And it's something it took me a few years to, I suppose, step into and say, okay, I can't do certain things, or I have to change how I'm doing it. Because I suppose when you
Mhm.
grow up a little bit, you want to be accommodating, you want to fit in and little things like that. So you can,
People
yeah.
pleasing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, completely. I think a lot of people who suffer with chronic illness can go into the people pleasing state until it gets to the point where you realize, all right, I
You
have
can't
to do, yeah, yeah, yeah,
you can't do it
absolutely.
anymore. That's what's rough. Especially like when you grow up a certain way, it's like you always want to keep the peace or like not cause conflict, but when you have a chronic illness, it's like sometimes you're gonna have to disappoint people and it sucks. It really does suck. But I've learned that it's better to disappoint and preserve my energy so I don't overextend myself into a flare or even like a hospitalization. And I think the person who I disappointed would be much happier knowing that like I'm able to feel better, you know, and show up for them at a different time if that means that like I'm preserving my health.
100%. And as you said, I just want to go back to how you said about turning your pain to power, because you mentioned there about your future career, and at the moment you're working in healthcare. I suppose you grew up in healthcare when you were forced into it, and now you have chosen to go into it as an adult. What's that journey been like?
Oh, it's been so rough. I'm not gonna even lie. It's been so rough. I mean, I honestly, the journey of even from finishing my bachelor's degree to trying to go to grad school and then having to pivot my career in like multiple ways to find a path, which I'm still exploring, of becoming a healthcare provider. I would say like the system is not accommodating. And especially in these medical spaces, you would expect them to accommodate. But a lot of the times it's like it's really, like, dependent on the person that you're working under or you're in their program, like, it's really dependent on how if they will are willing to accommodate you, which is rough. Even though there's laws in place, I would say, like, having a disability and needing extra things, it's been very difficult. I mean, I have been very lucky with, places that I've worked for them to be extremely accommodating, like, especially, like, in the hospital, I have, like, a place to sit. I have, more breaks incorporated. So, I think that I got very lucky with, but it's rough. I mean, healthcare itself is, like, very, very cutthroat, and I would say it's very competitive, and having a chronic illness, it's like sometimes I can't be as competitive or I don't wanna be competitive. I really don't have an energy in me to compete against another person because I'm not competing against anyone. I feel like I'm trying to do something for my younger self. It's a completely different purpose in comparison to what you see in the real life of like these people who are going into this field. And it's really disheartening sometimes too, because I'll see people who are so empathetic and so gracious. And then there's the opposite side where you meet people who are just they just wanna step all over you to get ahead. And so for me, it's like that journey of, like, trying to go into a higher purpose, but without being dragged down by, these people who, like, may not have the best intentions. It's taken a lot of grace and it's taken a lot of patience, but I really feel like no matter how many times I've had to pivot because of my health, I've done like a really great job at like trying to keep myself afloat and not compare. Because a lot of people like my age have like already entered into like their programs or have already completed their training. And I have to like sit there and just remind myself that like I am taking my time and that's completely okay. Because it's not the same as like a healthy person who's had like the privilege of doing all these things since they were like, 18 and like haven't had to take time off for their health, haven't had surgeries, haven't had to take medications, haven't. So it's definitely a lot. It takes a lot of willpower and strength to even enter the field. But yeah.
Absolutely. And I would say, in the sense that I know you're saying that you're delayed and people are moving on because they haven't had the same obstacles as you. But the life lessons you've had that will give you the empathy to help the people that you're going to encounter is something they might never achieve. So you will be able to have so much more grace and understanding of the people that you meet than these people who are skipping past it. And, their purpose of intro into a certain field is very different to your purpose of intro into it. You're coming from a complete place of empathy and wanting to do the best you can from your own experience. So yeah, I think you're going to make an amazing, amazing input into the medical space, because look
Yeah.
what you've done so far.
Yeah. I mean,
You can't be stopped. You cannot be stopped.
exactly. I would say that it takes a lot and you can shut doors, you can, not accommodate, but it's like I'm gonna come back stronger each time. I'll find a different path. Like I will pave my own path if that's what it takes.
100%. Breaking down the barriers that come in your way. There's no better woman. It seems that everything that gets in your way, you're like, I'm going to find a way around it, or I'm going to
Oh
build a
yeah.
bridge over it.
I'm very stubborn and very determined. Like whatever I want, I will ensure that I will find a way or a version to get it in one way or another.
There is power in those words. You're an amazing woman. One
Thank
question I have for you, I suppose, was this type of strength something that you feel you had inherently, or has it something that you have developed through your journey?
It's definitely been developed. I would say if you would have met me prior to my diagnosis, I did not have the same amount of strength. I would say I still had a lot of willpower. I still had a lot of determination from an early age. I remember I really wanted like to be a gymnast. I really wanted to be in that space, but unfortunately my immigrant parents couldn't afford it. And so I had done everything in my power to looking up like the low cost classes or like finding the cheapest gymnastics gym and, like making like finding ways so that I could be in that space. I mean, ultimately I did, but that was a dream that I kind of had to give up with my diagnosis. But I would say because of my diagnosis, I've become so strong. And it's a strength that I don't even want to endure, but it's like I'm forced to. But it's definitely, like, a very life-altering thing, and it makes you think in different ways and has a completely different mindset than somebody who has never encountered a chronic illness in their life.
It's an unfortunate education, but it is an education, and it gives you a whole new power that other people might never get the chance to develop throughout their life. And you are literally the embodiment of that power. It just springs to mind. My mother and father would always say to me the phrase "can't is won't," and you are
Yeah, oh
that.
my gosh, that's so true.
Completely. Your journey has unfortunately been one of the hardest journeys I think I've ever heard of. Look at what it has made you. Like, it is just a fantastic. The words out of your mouth are just such power, strength, and
Oh, thank you.
inspirational. There's no other words for it. You are something else, and I feel privileged to have heard your story today.
Thank you.
We've been flying through every question that has kind of come out of my mind. At this point, is there any specific topic you would like to talk about?
I guess you could say, like, the misunderstanding of, like, the public and how they perceive chronic illness, whether it's autoimmune or like something else. I would say that like a lot of people don't really see the day to day and like how much we have to do to accommodate ourselves or how much it takes to really show up. I would say that like even like having to work in healthcare, it's like I have to make sure that I sleep a certain amount of hours the night before, that everything is routine, like all my scrubs are like warming up, like have my layers all ready. People don't see what goes into it or how much you have to prepare to leave your house. And I think with that, it's like, I wish that there was more of like awareness about that because a lot of people don't see that, asking a normal person to show up versus asking someone who has a chronic illness to show up are two very different things. Because the normal person can just get up, leave their house, take their keys and go. The chronically ill person has to be like, do I have my meds? Do I have my heat pack? Do I have my insurance card? What if something goes, you never know. You never know. Do I have my ID in case I have to go to the hospital? Like, even if you feel completely fine, I think we have been conditioned and we've had so much experience of our health going into many different routes that we are always prepared for the worst case scenario at all times. And I think that's traumatizing and it's unfortunate. But it's also so real. Like, that's just our life.
Absolutely. And as you said, it's daily, being traumatized daily by the possible fear of what could go wrong. You have to put so many different things in place just on the off chance. And there's so many good days, so many good days. And I find for myself, sometimes it's like the one day I get cocky and the one day I leave the house without any spare ostomy supplies, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's the day it'll go wrong. So definitely, and that's the amazing thing about, and you accepting to come on the podcast and share your stories. The more openly we speak about what goes on day to day, the more information that gets out there. And unfortunately, a lot of people will never have to dive into these types of podcasts. But for when the opportunity does come, that maybe something comes up in their life, there's a ready-made guide of experience that someone can share and explain how possibly best to support someone and explain what goes on day to day. But when it comes to the future and your condition, what could that possibly look like for you at the moment?
Gosh, honestly, I don't know. I mean, it's so scary to even think about. I know I'm gonna eventually need a knee replacement or 2 knee replacements. I don't know when that'll happen, but it's kind of like pending. I hope that there's some research that comes out or some sort of special intervention where I can avoid that, but it's a progressive disease, right? So I try my best to slow it down through like lifestyle changes, taking supplements, like doing all these crazy things that a lot of people assume is woo-woo, but it's really just regulation and neuroscience. But for me, I really just want to become like the healthiest version of myself while working in healthcare and making a difference. I mean, the future of my disease is so unknown, but I've seen so many promising research methods and like clinical trials that it gives me hope for the future. But there's still a fear. I mean, you never know. Tomorrow's not promised. So I do try to live each day with as much, grace and, you know, fulfillment as I can. But it is rough. You never know what's going to happen.
Completely. And I always say that tomorrow is never promised for anyone, whether you're healthy or not. But when you have a chronic illness, tomorrow is a lot less promised. Yeah, there's always that fear and the wonderment and what tomorrow is going to bring. But I suppose all we do have is the present moment and our action on the day that can actually benefit us possibly tomorrow. And you are definitely, as I said, the embodiment of that. When it comes to, I suppose, advice for Sharon that was diagnosed back in 2015, if you could go back and if someone was to give you one piece of advice back then, what would it be?
My gosh. I would say to take care of yourself a lot more and jump right into the emotional and mental side of healing as well. I think that part of my healing was so delayed. We often don't really think how much of our mind and body connect. Had I gotten those therapies and interventions before, I think my life would have been a lot different. I matured quickly regardless because of the disease, but I think having that mental health support at an early age would have made such a big difference in everything, especially as like a teen. I feel like we have a lot of like reactions and crash outs, and now I'm much more calm and just I would say I'm almost like numb to it now. Like any catastrophic thing that happens to my health, I'm just like, well, it is what it is. I think back then it was like anything that could go wrong and that did go wrong, it was like the end of the world for me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so terrible. But now I think I've just gotten to a point where I'm just like, we'll figure it out. So I wish that I could give that advice to my younger self of you'll figure it out no matter what. And even if you have to pivot, it's so okay. And I think especially when you're a teenager, a lot of people don't realize that like you think that you're confined to like people that you're surrounded by and you think that they're going to be there forever. And once you grow up, it's like your circle expands and people just start getting more and more distant and people just move on with their lives. And like essentially like you're more isolated when you're an adult. It takes a
Yeah.
lot more effort. So at the end of the day, it's like the person's whose opinion, whose actions, whose plans matter the most are your own. And to not look at everyone else and like see like, what should I be doing? I think that's like the biggest advice I'd give myself. Stay in your
Yeah.
own lane.
Yeah, 100%. It's the best lane to be in because you can only be yourself. You don't have to wear a mask and pretend to be anyone else. When you're in your own lane, you're just being you. And the hardest
Yeah.
thing to be when you're that age is yourself.
So hard. I feel like a lot of people don't even realize that those years are so detrimental. Like they feel like the end of the world. And it's like you thinking back, you're like, as a teenager, my life wasn't that bad, but it felt that bad because you are confined to this tiny, tiny space filled with tiny, tiny minds. And if you breach out of that, like people are gonna look at you like you're crazy. And it's like the only opinions you cared about was your peers. And the people who deviated outside of that, I have so much respect and I have so much empathy and I look up to them because I'm like, I wish I had that mindset and perspective in high school. I really did. I really wish I just didn't care. But at that age, I felt like everybody cared.
And I suppose at that age, we're so small minded in the sense we've no evidence that anything exists outside our social circle. It's so important and it's life or death that we don't, if we fit in or we don't fit in. And when I think back to some of the people who initially didn't have that fear. They were just themselves, but they were maybe seen as weird or different. They've gone on to do
Yeah.
fantastic things because they didn't delay themselves and reach in the growth period. They just kind of stayed themselves and kept moving through. So it's fantastic advice to offer someone who's back at that teenage years. Is that you might not have any evidence that things are going to change or there's other possibilities out there, but there are.
It gets better.
Yeah.
And even though, like, the disease is progressive, I would say that, the management, the mindset, the community, like, all of that makes it so much better because being newly diagnosed, not knowing a single person, I don't even think we had I don't think we had TikTok back then, and if we did, it
Mm.
was probably, like, the Musical.ly app or whatever,
Yeah.
but I feel like there was a lot less awareness on social media, like, now there's so many creators out here, we see so many people and it's so inspiring that people are able to talk about their journeys, and I love learning from other people as well. I mean, I've people have given me advice about like, "Hey, you should get this test done," or "Maybe you should see this type of doctor," and I'm like, "Okay, like, noted. Like, let me take a look at that and explore that." And it's so informative because sometimes with chronic illness, you do have to go outside the box when nothing works, and that's where the controversy starts and when people are just kind of, like, skeptical about, like, will these things work or is it just a placebo effect?
Yeah, and whether it's a placebo or not, if it's working, that's all that matters. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, like if you have to go outside the box, it's a reason because what was in the box wasn't working. So if the initial thing that was thrown at you had done the trick and we'd all been saved and yada yada yada, we never would have had to find a different path. So it all comes from necessity. And I think some people are, as the word used ever, privileged that they don't have to step outside the box and they're not willing to see a different trail of thought because they don't have to move in that sort of sense. Is there anything else you'd like to dive into before I kind of come to the final question?
I guess I would say to also take care of your mind. I think mindfulness and neuroscience and just mental health therapies can make a very big difference, especially when you're not living a similar life to people around you. I would say it does really help to have that support. And there's also a lot for people who can't afford it, there's actually like even like online like free therapies or if you go and on the website of like universities who do have like graduate degrees who are training therapists, they actually do have free to low cost therapies from people who are in training, which is still better than no help at all. So I'm just an advocate for that because it's made the biggest difference on my mindset, my growth, and my maturity of being able to see a different perspective and really step out of like the zone of judgment when it comes to having your illness.
Yeah, 100%. I can say that by diving into my mental has allowed me to be much more caring to my physical. Whereas when I was living in the woe with me, why is this happening to me? Very depressive kind of situation growing up as a teenager with chronic illness. My mind wasn't in a good state. So I wasn't in the right state to help my physical, but by actually going to the mind first, getting the tools in place, going to the right people to speak about it and get the problems. Once you air a problem, even if it's not the person that you air it to can help you, you see it better yourself. You have a better understanding once you get the words off your chest and even journaling and different things like that. But as you said, it's testaments there that you would find a way that you are able to give the information that there is free route to this. Like cost shouldn't be a problem for access because thankfully we have social media and we have the internet now where there is someone who's going to be offering something to share and there's so many different avenues. So it's fantastic advice for people. When it
Mhm.
comes to well, there's one question that I love getting the perspective on because everyone has such a beautiful different take on it. What does happiness mean to you?
Gosh, happiness means a lot of different things for me. Happiness for me is equated with calmness, stability, and love. I would say that I surround myself with so many loving people. I mean, my inner circle, my friends are very, very loving and they do tend to make me happy. But I think happiness is something that ultimately has to come from the inner self. And that comes from self love, self respect, and making sure that you're taking care of yourself in every single aspect from mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. So for me, happiness is pouring into all parts of yourself and being there for yourself.
That's absolutely beautiful. A peaceful mind essentially is the key to happiness. Once you can dive into all these different areas, and they all, in fairness, make the soul and they make the person itself. So you have to be very adamant that you're not abandoning any particular avenue to improving your mental health. Sharon, it has
Yeah.
been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. And I love what you're doing for the community and honestly helping people feel seen and creating a space for all of us to share our stories. I mean, it's so, so great. And I appreciate it so much.
Oh, thank you very much. I love it. I feel so privileged to come on here and hear stories like yourself and hear the absolute resilience and power in your action and your words. It's my pleasure. So thank you very
Oh,
much.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Massive thank you to Sharon for coming on and sharing her story so openly. If Sharon's story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, follow, subscribe, and share this episode with someone you think might need to hear it. Every share helps these conversations reach the people who need to hear the most. Next week, my guest is Shay McCauley, a man who came back from the dead. Shay's a very successful entrepreneur, was the CEO of a pharmaceutical company on the NASDAQ. He was living the intense life of a high achiever till it caught up with him and he suffered 2 heart attacks. Shay's insight into life, though, really is fantastic, a really intelligent guy, and I can't wait to share the story with you. Thanks again for being here. I'll see you next week.